As we approach the season finale of Helluva Boss, I've been taking the time to go back and look at older episodes with fresh eyes, not just to remind us of what we know, but to try and find some new things, and perhaps get clearer insights into what may happen next. My name's Deepcut, welcome back to Cartoon Universe. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and if you want to hang out with me and some of my subscribers, head on over to our Discord server where we talk all things Hazbin, Hotel, and Helluva Boss. I'll put a link to it in the pinned comment down below. And now, let's start breaking down everything we learned from episode 2 of Helluva Boss. Episode 2 opens with the flashback, one where Octavia is crying from a nightmare she had, and Stolas goes to comfort her. It's interesting to note here that it really sets up the idea that Stolas is her favorite parent, and seemingly the one who takes the most care of her. We can't say much about what Stella feels for Octavia, but we never see her actually address Octavia within the show, ignoring her here in this episode, and plotting her father's murder right in front of her in episode 5. While we know that Stella takes Octavia with her when she finally separates from Stolas in episode 7, we don't know if that was something Octavia wanted or even approved of. The fact that Stella would try to have Octavia's father assassinated should tell you how little Stella seems to care for her, and we see the beginning of that here in episode 2, with Stella being unwilling to get up to comfort her own daughter and sending Stolas instead. Stella simply tells Stolas to take care of her. She doesn't say anything like "you take care of her this time," which might indicate that she shares in the burden of comforting their child from the nightmares. While Octavia does seem to call for both of her parents and even mentions her mother first, this doesn't seem to be just the beginning of her feeling closer to Stolas. On her wall in her room, we see that she has drawn a picture of her and Stolas together, right next to a portrait of her riding on Stolas' back. When Stolas does enter the room, she explains that her nightmare was that he had gone away, and that she could not find him anywhere, with no mention of her mother being missing in this nightmare as well. When Stolas comforts Octavia, it is of course through his beautiful song, "You Will Be Okay," which a lot of people took to be foreshadowing, and a lot of people feel upset about. In the song, Stolas talks about the end of creation, not just Earth, but even the 7 rings of hell collapsing, which was our first mention of the 7 rings that we got in the show. While he talks about it as being somewhat hypothetical in the song, it opens with him talking about the stars aligning for the event with some certainty. One thing he emphasizes throughout the song, especially in the extended version which can be found on YouTube, is that even if he is gone, Octavia will be okay, and he in fact suggests that the fact that he is gone should be seen as a sign that she will be okay. To fans like me, this seemed to foreshadow Stolas' death in some future episode, one where he gives his life as part of some biblical apocalyptic event, possibly with the intent of stopping it so that his daughter could continue to live on, or at the very least, continue to be okay through it all. Some fans find this hard to accept for a variety of reasons, some personal, such as just liking this character, and others saying that Vivzie wouldn't do this because it would be playing into the bury your gaze trope. For those who do not know, the bury your gaze trope refers to a common trend in media, particularly older media, where gay characters generally met tragic endings, often with a gay character or 2 gay characters and a couple both dying. I've seen some fans talk about this in an almost threatening way, saying that Vivzie wouldn't dare to do that, particularly after she's received some harassment from fans saying that she is somehow homophobic for including so many LGBT characters on the show, which, despite being an obvious positive representation, they want to take to mean that Vivzie Pop thinks that being LGBT is somehow sinful, since the characters are all in hell. That is an obvious bad faith read, and I personally doubt that an artist like Vivzie Pop would restrict her storytelling, especially changing planned arcs, just to placate people who want to be upset about something. For me personally, I know there is a lot of LGBT people who just want to see great characters with amazing conclusions to their stories, and that means that they deserve to have characters that die too, because that can be a dramatic and meaningful way to end a character's story. With there being a never-ending line of LGBT characters within the show, it's not like it would mean the end of that representation. That being said, this is just a theory on how the series will end, and it is entirely possible that the song is just some poetic turns of phrases meant to foreshadow something else entirely, or even nothing at all. Though something tells me that this amazing dramatic look into Stolas as a character, our first real look into his life, won't be some isolated thing. We already know Vivziepop is a master of foreshadowing. Just look at how the first episode is about the IMP gang going to assassinate a woman because someone's husband cheated on her with that woman, which perfectly foreshadowed Stella eventually hiring Stryker to assassinate Stolas. It's just too perfect a setup to ignore. I mentioned an extended version of the song earlier, and one interesting thing to talk about is that it seems to give details surrounding Octavia and her birth. In this extended song, Stolas sings about how the sun went dark on the day that Octavia was born, and how she stole the light and put it into her eyes, a cosmic event that surprised even Stolas, who is of course known for his mastery of astrology and space. Interestingly, we don't know exactly how long ago this flashback actually takes place. Octavia is much younger here and clearly in a teenage phase when we are in the present, but we don't know exactly what that means for natural-born royalty. Charlie, for instance, is said to be long-living but not immortal, with her being about 180 years old at the start of Hazbin Hotel, and time being said to move at a pace of 10 years for a demon, equaling 1 year on Earth, which makes sense as Charlie looks to be a young adult, perhaps just barely 18 in terms of physical development. A lot of this information comes from the wiki, which, while being supported by interviews and live streams from Vivziepop and other staff members, is a bit outdated and may not be the case when the show actually airs. On the Instagram, we can see that Octavia only recently celebrated her 17th birthday relatively recently, which would mean she is aging at the same rate as a human on Earth, more or less. However, the Instagrams have been said to not be 100% canon, as while they do try to keep things canon, it would be too easy for something they throw out offhandedly to be contradicted by something in the show. So we don't know if the flashback was 17 years ago or 170 years ago, but perhaps time will tell. When we finally flash to the present, we can see the sky outside of Stolas' mansion appears to be pink, something we saw in the Helluva Boss pilot as well. Each ring of hell, of course, has a different colored sky, with the primary location of both Helluva Boss and Hazbin Hotel taking place in the Pride Ring, which has a red sky. Here in the morning, the sky is pink, of course, and in the pilot of Helluva Boss, it appears to be morning when we see Stolas' mansion as well, as Blitz is sneaking out as Stolas sleeps, presumably after a night of lovemaking, though we can't say for sure. After all, Stella is home and entertaining guests outside, so if this was morning, that meant that Blitz and Stolas managed to spend the entire night together in their bed, something that Stella will later be upset about, but somehow didn't seem to notice. At night in both this episode and in episode 7, the sky here is a dark red, similar to the Pride Ring sky, though presumably a pink sky could look this way at night. After all, we will see later in this episode that the green sky of the Greed Ring, which is a very light minty green during the day, becomes almost blue as the sun begins to set here. There is one post on Stolas' Instagram account that shows Blitz sneaking out off of the balcony again, and we can clearly see the pentagram celestial body as well as the planet of heaven in the sky, so this would seem to indicate that this is the Pride Ring. However, like I said before, the Instagram accounts aren't exactly canon, so I wouldn't say that we really know for sure, especially with this post being 43 weeks old at the time of this video. In the morning, we get a good look at Stolas' home, which on top of its astrology theme, seems to be home to demonic plants, some of which Stolas takes care of and feeds some pretty exotic looking meats to. For those who don't know, a lot of prominent demons in the show, such as Stolas, are modeled off of demons from real-life biblical lore, with Stolas of course being one of the demons listed in the Ars Goetia of the Lesser Key of Solomon, a sort of reference guide for demons, how to summon them, and what they can do for you, with Stolas teaching about astrology and powers of plants. It should be noted that the royalty described in the Lesser Key of Solomon are not necessarily related, and instead the titles like Prince tend to designate the demon's place in the hierarchy. The Lesser Key of Solomon lists 72 demons in the Ars Goetia, and interestingly, Stolas is listed as a prince under Osmode, or Osmodius. While he is a king in the Ars Goetia listing, it is a separate system of nobility from the 7 Rings of Hell, which is modeled after the real-life Peter Binsfield classification of demons. While Osmodius is a king in the Ars Goetia, he is a prince in the Peter Binsfield classification as the Prince of the Lust Ring in the show, similar to how Lucifer from Hazbin Hotel is listed both as the King of Hell overall, but also a Prince of the Pride Ring, allowing for his daughter Charlie to still be recognized as a Princess of Hell. When Octavia awakens as a teenager, it is to Stella and Stolas having a fight. Despite it being some time since the pilot, she is still angry about him cheating on her, and talks about it as if it is a very recent surprise. With Stolas establishing his monthly arrangement with Blitz just in the previous episode, we don't know how much time has really passed since the pilot, but it really could be a matter of just a few weeks or even days. On the surface, Stella seems angry because of Stolas' cheating, but when Stolas apologizes, it is for specifically cheating while in their bed, saying he didn't have time to get a motel, which would indicate that cheating isn't something that Stella is really upset over at all, but rather she is upset that the cheating happened in such a personally insulting way, with an imp of such low status and in her bed, with Blitz announcing it right to her and her friends. This is something echoed in future episodes where we have come to learn that the fact that Stolas is sleeping with an imp specifically is something of a scandal. Even other imps like Wally are surprised. Not that Stolas is cheating on his wife, but that he is sleeping with an imp. We also see the first signs that Stolas is only interested in Blitz in particular, with real feelings and attraction towards him as a person, and not with imps as a whole. He insists he has no interest in a small imp that Stella accuses Stolas of wanting to sleep with, and we don't see him fawn over any of the other imps in the episode or even in the Wrath Ring in episode 5. The only indication we have that he might like the other imps is him reading a book called Imps in the Sheets at the end of episode 5, but even then he may very well just be imagining Blitz in particular. It would seem that his arrangement with Blitz really proves that it is just about him, even if only on that physical level, considering that he could use his power to sleep with any other imp he wanted without having to give up his book if he really wanted to. While eating breakfast, Octavia is eating cereal for which Fizzarali, or a Robo-Fizz in particular if the lack of pupils are any indication, is on the cover of the box. While this is before we saw Robo-Fizz, who is of course introduced later in this very episode, it helps pave the way for the reveal that Fizzarali is a famous figure in Hell, not just as children's entertainment or a cereal mascot, but also as mass-produced pleasure bots that we even see advertised on billboards above Millie and Moxie's apartment. We of course recently saw that Fizzarali is in fact an imp, not just from his tail that we can see popping out from under his outfit, but from photos that Blitz has with him from when they were younger, raising the question of whether or not people in Hell know that he is an imp, as his jester theme seems to be a way to hide that fact, with other jester-like demons existing in the background of episode 7, as well as Mammon, the prince of the Greed Ring, seemingly being a jester-based demon. This leads me to believe that people don't know that Fizzarali is an imp, something that makes sense considering how looked down upon sleeping with an imp is. Stolas takes his daughter to Loo Loo Land to get her mind off of the fighting between him and Stella, but uses it as an excuse to hire Blitz to be his bodyguard for the day so he can flirt with him. We are told by Octavia, as well as through various signs around the park and posters in the background, that LuLu Land is a theme park that rips off another theme park, LuLu World, spelled with U's instead of O's, as Robo-Fizz kindly explains with his signs. LuLu World is a theme park in the Pride Ring owned by Lucifer, and we can even see that LuLu Land rips off Lucifer's own character design by having lots of Apple imagery. Despite legal battles, LuLu Land continues to exist and is legally recognized as being just different enough to get by as long as they spell LuLu Land with the O's. In live streams, Lucifer is said to be very enthusiastic about his theme park and runs it as a point of passion, with LuLu Land being a cheap knockoff to get money for the Prince of Greed Mammon, who cares less about the product and more about his income, so of course would rip off something already successful at making money that was driven by passion. According to the Helluva Boss Twitter account, sinners can only exist in the Pride Ring with its red sky, which means they can go to places like Pentagram City and Imp City, which are both in the Pride Ring, as well as Lucifer's LuLu World, but not to Mammon's LuLu Land, which is in the Greed Ring with its light green sky, the color of money. LuLu Land seems to attract mostly imps, even poor ones from the Wrath Ring, as Millie explains it's where her family would go on vacation when they could afford it. It is here, of course, that we also see the flashback showing that Blitz worked at LuLu Land for a while, and one thing I bring up a lot is that in this flashback, it looks like Blitz didn't have his white scar yet, something that we know he got some time after performing with his sister, as seen in the poster of them together in episode 4, but during or before the time that he worked for Vraska, as we can see in his photos with her from episode 7. Some fans have pointed out that the light hitting Blitz's face seems to indicate that we don't actually know if he has the scar or not. I did some color sampling from the scene, and while it doesn't match the light that it hits with the horns, it also doesn't really match his red skin either, so it is hard to say. For me personally, I think that the shot being juxtaposed against him in the exact same pose once we flash forward to the present where we can see his scar was meant to tell us that he didn't have it yet, but we cannot say for sure. While looking around the park, we gotta look at Hell's currency, known as souls, and see that it has a jester demon on it, as opposed to some dead presidents like we do here in America. When Fizzaroli holds up a contract that Mammon has signed, we see that he ends his signature with the doodle of a jester, presumably himself since it is his signature, which seems to indicate that it is Mammon that is pictured on the money, and that this is a somewhat accurate likeness of him. Mammon being a prince of greed, it makes sense that he would be printed on Hell's currency, as we see that he even sells merch based off of him and his name through the photos of Blitz and Fizzaroli when they were children that we got in episode 7. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking through and watching the entire review. Leave a comment down below letting me know you made it to the end, and I will promise to respond to you. See you guys next time!